three things that I want to talk about today, um, and they're not related at all, but I think they're important, and they cover some of the topics that I want to cover in the channel and in the podcast as well. Just kind of to give some context as the reasoning behind these topics is things that I've been looking at and being updated um, about these topics. The first one is a local to me, local to Las Vegas, the what has been going on in regards to the COVID-19 response from the state and from the city of Las Vegas. I like to read a little bit about what has been going on, and you can also see what I'm talking about. Um, the new big news that we got today, this afternoon, was that Governor Sisolak, which is our current governor of Nevada, he decided that the opening of Nevada is going to be phased out. Um, Schools are going to be remain closed, so that impacts my own job, my own practice as a school teacher, and that means that we are going to have to continue to work online and adapt to these changes. We've been very fortunate. I've been very fortunate, along with colleagues, that we actually have employment, which is not the same thing that I can say for other folks. But at the same time, it's been challenging, given the inequities that our community has in regards to access to technology and access to internet. So it's been definitely a curveball, but we've had to adapt, and we're going to have to continue to adapt, given that the schools will continue to be closed for the rest of the year. It's just very disheartening in the sense that um, as I am coursing my graduate studies in education, there's an understanding that schools are more than just the academics, right? A lot of students um, have developed these skills to socialize and, and to work, to function in a society. And you would, uh, given my kind of research on the matter, schools are, in a sense, not only academic institutions but they're social institutions too. So the learning that goes beyond what's in books and what's in each other subjects is in par with social relations beyond school. I think that's the biggest thing that most students get. As I recall on my own, like reflecting now with with our quarantined lifestyle, I've reflected on my own education as a K-12 student in the U.S. for the majority of my K-12 career, and the things that I remember most fondly are the social situations and the connections with the teachers, the reports I was built, the friendships that I've had, those different social connections. So something that we're losing is that social connection, especially those who are in the on the path to graduation. They'll be withdrawn from your traditional social events such as prom, dances, their own graduation. That's something that our school here is trying to at least have in a very responsible manner, in a distance manner, so that the students that are graduating from high school, they can at least have that experience instead of years from now recalling their graduation as something more bitter than sweet. But going beyond that, the governor decided to respond this afternoon after about a month of his decision to have Nevada closed, in the sense of many non-essential shops, many public institutions to be remain closed, and people to adhere to social distancing guidelines until 30 April. So I want us to take a look and listen for those who are viewing, and those who are listening to the podcast are going to be you're going to be um, listening on as well.
Well, John, today the governor was asked numerous times if there's a date for people and businesses to plan when the state and certain businesses could reopen. The governor says the state is not ready for one and says when that phase one could finally be rolled out, that all depends on where the virus is at, experts at the state level, and how people and Nevadans are obeying social distancing rules.
It's important that we save as many lives as possible and also protect those businesses.
Governor Steve Sisolak says Nevada is still in phase 0. Current shutdowns should continue and schools will close through the rest of the year. Health experts and epidemiologists say COVID-19 cases in the state have reached a plateau, but they're not on the decline.
We're doing everything we can to open up the economy as quickly as possible, but I will only do that when we meet the criteria set forth for getting and moving into phase 1.
President Trump and the COVID-19 task force released a 3-phase guide for states to reopen. Sisolak presented his office's version of phase 1 with more specific restrictions. Vulnerable populations should remain home. Maintain the governor's travel advisory to quarantine 14 days upon entering the state. No groups of 10 or more with social distancing. Face masks in public with possibly stronger measures. As for businesses, facilities, and healthcare providers, in-person visits for senior nursing homes are prohibited. Bars will remain closed. Places such as gyms, movie theaters, places of worship are still under review. Elective surgeries are under consideration. We asked Governor Sisolak his take on the public plea from Wynn CEO Matt Maddox. The head of Wynn outlined a proposal for a slow reopening of the Strip in mid to late May, with masks for Wynn guests, thermal cameras, spacing in casinos, and mandatory social distancing.
He's proposing a plan for himself, not for the entire industry.
Sisolak says when casinos do reopen, guidelines will be put forth by the Gaming Control Board, and his office is still waiting for those specific recommendations.
So again, there is still small steps for the opening of non-essential businesses. As you can see in Nevada, we are still in that phase. There might be more stricter codes in terms of using your face masks outside. So anybody that lives here, that's my recommendation, that you continue to adhere to that, not do anything foolish. We've seen different protests in that sense, that they want to just ignore the recommendations. And my personal opinion in terms of that is just to follow the guidelines that the state has given us, because and listen to the professionals. There's a lot of misinformation, and whether this is real, this is not. I think it's a spit in the face of those working in the medical industry, those who are suffering through COVID-19, and those who have passed away, unfortunately. It's a spit on their grave to do foolish activities that disavow these guidelines. So that is something that we will continue to cover, that I'll continue to cover and inform everyone beyond the month of April and so forth. Sisolak, he does mention that he were in a better spot than we were 6 weeks ago, which was a little bit prior to the official closing of all businesses in mid-March. But there's still more to go. We haven't reached our peak, according to his interpretation, based on what his advisors have told him. So it's not over yet, and we will, once that curve is flattened, we'll try to. The governor says we'll try to open in regards to schools and most public institutions, since the state government has a little bit of more of a control over those institutions. He's definitely going to maintain that those guidelines for closure, and then slowly move into phase two. But as of today, in the state of Nevada, all of the public schools are and charter schools will most likely private schools as well will continue to remain closed and maintain curriculum through online modules as we get ready to close this semester. So I just wanted everybody to know about that, and that this is no joke. This is something that needs to be taken seriously. People need to be staying home so that we do not overwhelm the healthcare system, which is, in my view, is brittle as it is. It has been since before, since it became more monetized and for profit. So it's brittle now. It's been brittle before. Let's not. This is not the time to really overwhelm it with cases. So let's try our best to stay inside and stay strong wherever you may be, whether it's Nevada or whether it's outside other states or in the other countries. Same thing with colleagues, with folks in places like Mexico who have poor leadership at the moment, poor decisions of deciding to open beforehand. And I honestly believe this is the time we listen to state governments that I think know what is best for the state. They have more knowledge of what's going on in the community than the federal government. I'm not saying go all against your federal authority, but in the case of places like Mexico, places like Brazil, and places like the U.S. with poor leadership and decisions emanating from the federal government, let's just follow just listen to the professionals, listen to people in the medical industry and healthcare industry to see what their opinions are. And looking at somebody who does not believe that we should remain closed to continue the stay-at-home order is our dearest mayor of Las Vegas, city of Las Vegas. Miss Goodman, Mayor Goodman wants us to open, wants the city to open, and I understand her frustration, given that Las Vegas is very dependent on the tourism industry and the gambling industry. So yes, we do need tourism for the economy to prosper in Las Vegas. That's a big part of it. But I think it goes far beyond saying that the public health is a priority, and then the rest will follow. But let's go ahead and listen to the reporter on her opinion that was mentioned today. That was also posted today.
Don't, and we've had all these other flus and things and do we stop driving cars because we have so many car accidents?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, how many minutes are we doing?
Pardon me?
How many minutes?
Five?
Five, three?
Until you get sick of me.
No, only because I have a schedule, but really and truly, this will shrink down. I have to know in my brain.
Let's do five.
Okay, no, because it will shrink down to, so pick what will be your focus? I know you have a focus. What is it, my insanity?
Well,
or Klubeck screaming?
Let's include the insanity portion.
Okay.
I call it individualism,
Okay.
your independence.
Yes.
But also, I'd like to get, we can go ahead and start with this.
Sure.
I want to know your vision for reopening, and when do we do this? Is the time now?
Are we on?
Yes.
Oh, okay. My vision is to get our people back to work. It really is, and I really rely on the private sector. We have so many small businesses that let people go. They have their whole life savings in the business, and now they're destitute because they're shut down. But more importantly, all these people that no longer have a paycheck that can feed their family, pay rent, they don't even have a roof over their head. So my dream is to turn it to the private sector and say, if you're ready to open, and I know you have a plan because you've been working on it all this time as we asked you to be doing, let's go. And if in fact your business has too many cockroaches on the floor or something, you're not going to have any business, and that's your doing. So what I want is to see our hotels back in business, these great restaurants, the taverns, the shops. There's so much going on, and to have people be able to get back together. Because I truly believe there are many of us that are asymptomatic, carrying this germ, this horrible virus, or maybe had it and didn't even know it. In January, I had the most unbelievable flu-like symptoms, and at that time there wasn't any way to determine. And I did what I always do my whole life long. When I'm sick, if I have a fever, I was home in bed because I was paralyzed and couldn't do anything. But really, when I know I have some contagion, I don't go near people. I always say, please don't come near me. I have a cold. And so it's a courtesy thing as well as, just care. So that's the whole thing, and I'm ready now. I'm not the dictator. I'm just saying we're ready to open. We asked initially, though, to be a control valve. When we do the scientific experience, you always have someone getting the true vaccine, and then you have a control group that's getting the placebo.
Okay, so the conversation goes a little bit beyond that, but in short, what she leads to, as it's titled, she calls the stay-at-home order insanity to continue on beyond these weeks. She wants the city to be reopened, and I can see her concern. Right, it's very critical that we have an open city. Due to the economy, a lot of people lost their jobs. Businesses are hurting. Um, so yes, there's kind of a discussion, right, with the governor. She's not too happy with the governor's decisions. Um, she thinks that it's we're ready to go. We're ready to start unraveling the opening plans of different businesses. So, yeah, she thinks that testing is a waste of time, that we've waited long enough, that that this directive is not the best for the city of Las Vegas. So she claims that there's nothing against the governor, right? But yeah, there's definitely some friction between Governor Sisolak and Mayor Goodman in terms of what will happen after what will happen throughout these months. So yeah, there's some who are in favor. There have been different protests in the across the U.S. I believe it started one in Michigan. I read that there was some in Illinois, California. We had one here on Saturday. So there's been definitely some pushback. But again, that's in my view that is foolishness to go out and protest the conditions, because you were sitting here exposing yourself to the disease with people you might not know if you're at a protest. So yeah, those are more my opinion. I want to look at two reports, one from a local news station here, and the one from CBS. So yeah, let's take a look at. So this was a response from the mayor earlier in the week, and it'll talk a little bit about New York. So I'd like for us to listen to both parts, because it talks about New York's response and what's going on there, and then our situation here in Nevada.
Death toll from the virus has risen sharply, in part because of how victims are counted. That number is now up to around 31,000. That includes more than 4,000 New Yorkers who were never tested but did show symptoms. Meanwhile, some Americans, including these protesters in Lansing, Michigan, are losing patience with social distancing. In New York, the rules are actually getting stricter. Our lead national correspondent, David Begnaud, is in New York City. David, what exactly is changing?
We have to wear masks now, Anthony, especially when you walk into food marts like the one behind me. The governor's order will say if you cannot maintain a social distance, you are required to wear a mask. And other cities are doing this, like Los Angeles. Speaking of LA, the mayor actually said that he could ban, it is likely he will ban all large gatherings such as concerts and sporting events through 2021. Back here in New York, the governor is saying, look, the latest tool I have to control the spread of the virus is the masks, but the tool the governor needs even more than that, and you're going to hear it again, widespread testing.
We cannot do it without federal support.
Governor Andrew Cuomo insists that large-scale testing in a state the size of New York is not possible without the help of Washington.
We've only done 500,000 tests. You're talking about a state with 19 million people.
But there is outrage bubbling elsewhere in the country over stay-at-home orders.
This shutdown has become one of total insanity.
That's the mayor.
So again, the mayor believes that the stay-at-home order that's been expanded beyond March, going into April, and now into May, and this was before the announcement from the governor. She thinks it's insanity that we've been ordered to have this continue, have this stay-at-home order continue, and we'll see why.
Of Las Vegas, Carolyn Goodman, pointing out that Nevada's death toll has been less than half of 1% of the population. She's demanding an end to the state's lockdown.
It makes no sense. For heaven's sakes, for being closed is killing us already.
Protests in Michigan over the governor's strict isolation orders clogged streets on Wednesday. The governor says she understands people are angry.
I just urge you, don't put yourself at risk. And don't put others at risk either.
Meanwhile, Smithfield Foods in South Dakota is reportedly the biggest COVID-19 hotspot in the country, with 644 cases coming from a now-closed pork processing plant. The U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, tweeted Wednesday that he is doing everything he can to get the plant back open and minimize disruptions to the nation's food supply. In Colorado, 21-year-old Cody Lister is the youngest person to die from coronavirus in the state.
He got up one morning and he had to go to school. He had to go to Grand Junction. Grand Junction is 4 hours from where we are. And that is when we actually called for the ambulance.
Within 1 hour of arriving at the hospital, he was on a ventilator, and 8 days later, he was gone. In Florida, Gerald and Arlene Polinsky died the way they lived, together. Both infected with the disease, they wound up at the same hospital. Their son-in-law David wrote on Facebook, in a scene befitting a story-tale ending, as his body was being moved out of the room, the nurses told us that she noticed, and she said, "Together, Jerry." And then she was gone.
The Polinskys were married for 64 years. Back in Colorado where Cody died, we talk about the randomness of this virus. His father had coronavirus, his mother had the symptoms, and she's a diabetic. Both of them recovered without ever needing to go to the hospital. Yet Cody died at 21 years old. Tony?
David, you can understand people's frustrations economically, but at the same time, as you remind us, there's a major health threat here as well. David, thank you very much.
Yeah, we see it time and time again. It's very unprecedented. It's hard to pinpoint who will be affected and who will not. There's people who are asymptomatic. There's people that get over the disease, that might have other health issues. There's people that are completely have no issues, and then we see them succumb to the disease. So I think this news cast is a little bit old, so I'm going to just to wrap it up. We have In Nevada, we have an extension to the stay-at-home order. There's going to be slow phasing out of that order with different businesses opening up slowly. Schools will be closed until the end of the year, and we'll see if the federal government provides another aid package, just like the one that they processed and is in the process of dispersing to a lot of families. There's been a package discussed to go towards hospitals and small businesses, so that's progress there. But we'll see if individuals can also receive that support. That will have um, another financial burden coming up towards the end of April. We're already at the 21st, so the next, usually when rent's due, right, or when mortgage is due, usually the beginning of the month or the end of the month. So we'll see how that turns out. Yeah. So beyond that, I'd like to expand, and in terms of the topics that I was going to discuss, I'd like to keep it short, even though it's been long already. I will be discussing my findings in the Bible and my perspectives on the Bible in at a later time. I'd like to do my weekly time in with the Economist, and mention a particular article that I found that really caught my eye. Well, there are two things. One is that it's an opinion piece on Bolsonaro's government, and it's talking about how China has come out of this COVID-19 crisis. It's talking about the consequences of this crisis, right? What would happen to China? Would it be the new hegemon? Possibly. What are the geopolitical consequences? So China didn't start the year very well. They suffered with COVID-19 towards the end of 2019, and we all know that this all started in Wuhan, and this might have been the Chernobyl. They call it the Chernobyl of China, right? And if I can give you a little bit of context, Chernobyl was kind of one of the conduits to the end of the Soviet Union. You had the economic toll of the Afghan war in Afghanistan, that the Soviets were involved, and that affected them. But then Chernobyl happened, and that sort of slowly led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. But this is a different story. The Communist Party of China imposed a quarantine right away. They were severe in the way they handled it. They locked down the city. They didn't allow people to come in or out, and that really worked. It looks like, right? You see factories in China are reopening. There's vaccine trials happening. At some point, China was the leading country with the most cases in terms of people with COVID-19 and people who have died of COVID-19. But China is claiming this as a triumph, that they've brought this epidemic under control, thanks to the one-party rule, thanks to the strong measures that they've been able to take, and that they have the ability to take given the system of government that they have. So, according to this article, you see foreign policy watchers really watching what is going on in China, especially foreign policy watchers in the West. They think that China could rise from this catastrophe, and it could be the geopolitical turning point. The U.S.'s hegemony might soon end, according to the Economist. And the way that the current government is dealing with this in the U.S., the Trump administration, how slowly it responded, and the different claims that the president has made over the progress of COVID-19, of controlling COVID-19, and is dubious, to say the least. So the manner in which the U.S. has responded, I think, only sheds light to the vast majority of problems that we've had for the years that are accumulating now. And I think, to go even further, I would go to posit the idea that these symptoms, these were the symptoms, these were the results of not only the Trump administration, but a long way of poor decisions in the making since the Bush administration, since the Obama administration. And President Obama, he did some to reform the healthcare system. And that's kind of the focus here, in my view. We had a candidate twice, time and time again, that duly noted and that made it its top priority to address the infrastructure in the healthcare system, where the U.S. is far, far behind other countries. So this pandemic has really shown the true colors of a stagnating empire that has had success in medicine and in science and in technology for most of the 20th century. So even the president himself acknowledges this. He's worried about the numbers that China puts out there and the progress that they made. So you start seeing administration which loves to blame others, to blame other people, like using the term Kung Flu or the Chinese virus, because I believe that this is weak response, comical response to their true fears, the true nature of the true fears of the rise of China in this pandemic, in the way that they've dealt with it. The economist before, in the early advent of the pandemic, mentioned that the way that China responded to the pandemic would be what would make or break the Communist Party. And it looks like it's the one that's cementing their role in China as a state and the role of China in the world. It has become from one of the poorest countries in the 1940s and 50s, way below the economic power, the U.S. And in 50 years, 50 to 70 years, it has definitely risen to the challenge. It has definitely consolidated its power and its recognition in the world. It's taking on that dark, really eerie practice of economic imperialism in different regions in Africa and in other parts of Asia. And now it might be the country to turn to as the hegemon. Again, that's coming from a Western perspective. We have to also understand that the way that media is handled in China is is very biased, very censored, um, and they've used that to their advantage. First, by trying to suppress the doctors in Wuhan who alerted um, that this pandemic was imminent, and now they're changing their motives. They're looking at how they can take advantage of this. So yeah, I guess we will see what China gets out of this. You know what how these other Western countries like developed countries like the U.S. and like the EU and the EU region, how they respond to the rise of the economic rise of China and their response to the COVID-19. I'd like to stop there. So I appreciate you who are listening and also watching this conversation on YouTube or on the podcast. And definitely welcome anybody to share any topics that they'd like to see discussed and researched, just talked about. I'm always welcome to inviting new guests to just have a chat and productive discussion, informative discussion. If you're interested in connecting, you're always welcome to send me an email at spacebebop1994@gmail.com or misrayados18 at gmail.com. You can always send me a tweet at Mexichairo, and MEXICHAIRO, and please subscribe, add to the comments, and I hope that you enjoy this session. Thank you, and have a good night.